Barron Trump unleashed a savage assault, mocking Obama's hope and change as a pathetic lie that destroyed America and left the country in ruins. Full of his father's venom, Barron sneered and attacked without mercy, treating the former president like a weak, fake leader who never belonged. But Obama struck back with one devastating line that shattered the room, forcing Barron to face the exact same cruel, humiliating attacks his father had once rained down on Obama's own family. This wasn't a public event or a political stunt. No cameras, no reporters, no staff waiting outside. It was a secret, private meeting arranged quietly between former President Barack Obama and Barron Trump, the youngest son of President Donald Trump. Barron Trump pushed open the heavy wooden door to the private library, the old hinges creaking softly in the quiet Washington building. Two chairs faced each other under the soft glow of a few lamps. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and polished wood. He straightened his shoulders and stepped inside, his heart beating harder than he wanted to admit. This wasn't supposed to be public. No cameras, no staff, just the two of them. Barack Obama was already seated, leaning back slightly in his chair with his hands resting calmly on the table. He looked steady, almost too relaxed, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He didn't stand up right away. He just watched Barron approach with that famous half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes tonight. "Barron," Obama said, his voice low and even, "thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." Barron stopped near the table and gave a short nod. "Mr. President," he replied, keeping his tone flat. He pulled out the chair and sat down, his back straight. The silence between them felt heavy right from the start. No small talk, no fake smiles, just two men from completely different worlds staring across the table. Obama leaned forward a little. "Look, this isn't about politics or scoring points. I agreed to meet because you asked, and I respect that. We can talk straight. About leadership, about what it really means. No scripts, just honesty. What do you want to say?" Barron felt the words he'd prepared rising up fast. He didn't wait. He jumped right in, his voice steady but already carrying an edge. "My father has always said you destroyed this country," Barron started, locking eyes with Obama. "He told me the division we see now, the anger, the mess with the economy and bad foreign deals, it all started under your watch. You talked about hope and unity, but you left America more split than ever. People lost trust. Jobs went overseas. Allies laughed at us. That's not leadership. That's failure." Obama didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly, listening. But Barron wasn't done. The tension in his chest pushed him forward. "And let's be real," Barron continued, his voice getting sharper. "My father wasn't afraid to ask the questions everyone else whispered about. Where did you actually come from? Why were there so many holes in your story?" He stood up when no one else would. He made people face the truth about who was really running the country. The question about birtherism hung in the air like a challenge. Then Barron leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the oak table. The calm from the first few minutes was already gone. He could feel the fire building inside him, fed by years of listening to his father tear down everything Obama stood for. "You want to talk about leadership?" he said, his voice rising. "Then let's talk real facts. Under your watch, the country got more divided than ever. Race relations went backward. People stopped trusting the government. The economy was shaky, and you signed deals that screwed American workers. My father had to come in and fix the disaster you left behind. That's not opinion. That's what happened." Obama sat still, listening without interrupting. His face stayed composed, but his eyes sharpened as Barron kept going. Barron pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket, an old printed article his father had saved. He slapped it on the table and started reading aloud, his voice getting louder with every line. "Listen to this," Barron said, almost shouting now. "This piece from back then called your presidency a failure. It said your promises of hope were nothing but empty talk that left millions of Americans angry and forgotten. You pushed policies that hurt the middle class while you and your friends got richer. My father kept this because it proved what he was saying all along. You talked big about unity, but you created the biggest split in modern history." The words echoed in the quiet library. Barron's face was flushed. This was the first time he let his real anger show. He stood up from his chair, breathing hard, staring down at Obama like he had finally landed a punch that couldn't be ignored. Obama waited a beat, then spoke in a calm but direct tone. "Barron, I hear you, but let me ask you something important. Are you saying all this because you've lived through it and studied it yourself? Or are you speaking with your father's voice in your head?" The question hit like a slap. Barron froze for a second, then his jaw tightened. "Don't try to twist this on me," he shot back, his voice louder now. "This isn't just my father's words. I've seen what happened. You stood up there talking about hope and change, but it was all fake. All of it. You made people believe things would get better, then left the country more broken than before. That's not real leadership. That's acting. That's pretending to care while everything fell apart." Barron stayed on his feet, his hands clenched at his sides. The tension in the room had jumped to a new level. He pointed at the article still lying on the table. "You can sit there acting all calm and wise, but the results don't lie. My father had to clean up your mess, and millions of Americans know it. So don't lecture me about leadership when you're the one who helped break this country in the first place." Obama leaned forward slightly, his expression steady, but his eyes now locked on Barron with real intensity. Obama let the heavy silence hang in the air for a few seconds after Barron's angry outburst. Then he leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Barron with a much sharper intensity. The calm professor tone was gone. Now he was striking back with something deeper. "You keep throwing around those old questions about my background, about where I came from, and whether I really belonged in the White House," Obama said, his voice low but cutting. "For years, my family and I lived with that poison. The birther attacks weren't just some side story on cable news. They followed us home. People questioned my birth certificate, doubted my loyalty to America, and even whispered nonsense about my own children. It wasn't politics anymore. It became personal attacks meant to break me down and make me feel like a stranger in the country I served." Barron tried to sit up straighter, but Obama kept pressing, his words steady and unrelenting. "Your father was one of the loudest voices pushing that garbage. He made sure the rumors spread everywhere, turning doubts into a movement. And now you're sitting here repeating the same script. So tell me, Barron, how do you think that really felt? Waking up every day knowing millions of Americans were being fed lies about who I was, about my family, about my right to lead? It wasn't just words, it was designed to destroy." Barron jumped in quickly, trying to defend himself. "Those weren't lies. People had real questions. My father was just asking for transparency." A lot of Americans agreed with him. But Obama didn't back off. He leaned in closer and started dismantling Barron's points one by one with cold, clear logic. "Transparency?" Obama shot back. "Or weaponized rumors? Because when you spread doubts without real evidence, you're not looking for truth. You're just hurting people to score points. You accuse me of creating division, but look at what you're doing right now. You came into this room armed with your father's grudges, ready to throw the same attacks in my face. That's exactly how real division grows. Not from policy disagreements, but from turning people against each other with personal poison." Barron tried again, his voice getting tighter. "My father only said what others were afraid to say. He stood up for regular Americans who felt ignored." Obama immediately countered, and by doing that, he made millions feel like their president wasn't even American. "You want to talk about leadership and responsibility? Real responsibility means owning the damage your words cause. You can't keep hiding behind 'my father said' forever." The pressure kept building. Barron felt cornered, his arguments crumbling under Obama's calm but relentless logic. Every time he tried to push back, Obama turned it around with simple facts and direct questions that left no easy escape. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Then Obama delivered the hardest hit of the night. He looked Barron straight in the eyes and asked in a quiet but extremely intense voice, "Let me ask you something real. If someone stood up tomorrow and publicly said Melania isn't your real mother, that your whole family story is fake and manufactured, how would that make you feel? Be honest with yourself. How deep would that cut? The question slammed into Barron like a truck. His face went completely pale. His mouth opened, but nothing came out at first. The shock hit him hard and fast. His hands started shaking visibly on the table as the weight of the words sank in. For several long seconds, he just stared at Obama, completely stunned, his mind racing. The comparison was brutal. He suddenly understood exactly what Obama had gone through, and it shook him to his core. Barron shoved his chair back violently and stood up, breathing heavily. "You have no damn right to bring my mother into this," he shouted, his voice cracking with raw anger. His fists were clenched tight, his body tense, ready to leave. But after a few painful seconds, he stopped himself. He stood there frozen, breathing hard, glaring at Obama with pure fury mixed with something else, confusion and pain. Then Barron slammed his hand down on the oak table, not hard enough to break anything, but loud enough to echo through the quiet library. "You have no right to talk about my family like that," he shouted, his voice shaking with fury. "You just tried to humiliate me and my mother. That's low. That's exactly what my father always said about you. You act like you're above it all, but you'll hit below the belt when it suits you." Obama didn't raise his voice. He stayed seated, but his tone turned sharp as a blade. "Real strength isn't about shouting or pounding tables, Barron. It's about having the guts to look in the mirror and face who you really are. You came here attacking my record, my family, and my character. Now that the mirror is turned on you, you can't handle it." Barron's face burned red. He reached into his jacket again and pulled out another piece of paper, this one with a famous quote from his father printed on it. "Here's proof," he said, his hands still trembling as he read it out loud. "My father once said Obama was the worst president in history. He was weak, he apologized for America, and he let our enemies walk all over us." That's not just talk. That's the truth millions of people still believe. Obama leaned forward, his eyes locked on Barron. He spoke slowly, cutting the quote apart word by word. "Let's look at that carefully. Worst president in history? That's an opinion, not a fact. He was weak? I ended the war in Iraq, took out bin Laden, and kept America safe from major attacks for 8 years. He apologized for America? I stood up for this country on the world stage while respecting our allies. Your father's words sound strong, but they fall apart when you check them against reality. That's the problem with slogans. They feel good, but don't hold up." Barron couldn't take it anymore. The pressure that had been building inside him for years finally burst out. He stood up even straighter, his voice cracking with raw emotion as he yelled, "You don't know what it's like living in my father's shadow. Every day, every decision, every word. People compare me to him. They expect me to be exactly like him, to think like him, to fight like him. You have no idea how heavy that is." The confession hung in the air, loud and painful. For the first time, Barron wasn't just attacking Obama. He was revealing the exhaustion and weight he carried every single day. His breathing was ragged, his eyes glassy with a mix of anger and something close to tears. The library felt smaller, the tension thicker than ever. Obama didn't miss a beat. He used Barron's own words against him with deadly precision. "So you're letting that shadow define you for the rest of your life?" he asked, his voice calm but piercing. "You're standing here repeating your father's lines, carrying his grudges, and letting his battles become yours. Is that what you want? To spend your whole life in someone else's shadow instead of finding your own light?" Barron stood there frozen, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. The words hit him harder than any insult. He wanted to fire back, but for a split second he had nothing. Barron stayed standing for a long moment, his chest still rising and falling hard. Then, slowly, the fight seemed to drain out of him. He pulled his chair back and sat down heavily, his shoulders slumping for the first time all night. The library fell into a long, heavy silence. Barron stared at the wooden table, his eyes red and watery. He blinked hard, trying to push back the emotion, but it was clear he was shaken. All the shouting, all the anger had left him exhausted and exposed. Obama watched him quietly, giving the young man space. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower and gentler, but still carried real weight. Leadership isn't about winning every argument or carrying your family's grudges forever, Barron. Real responsibility means looking at the damage we cause and choosing not to repeat it. You don't have to live with the hate and division from the last generation. You can choose your own path. You can decide what kind of man you want to be instead of just being an extension of your father's battles. Barron didn't respond right away. He kept his head down, fingers tapping nervously on the table. The words were sinking in deeper than he expected. Obama leaned forward slightly and continued, his tone becoming more personal. "I remember sitting down with my daughters when they were younger," Obama said quietly. "They would come home from school or see things online about me, the attacks, the lies, the ugly rumors about our family. I had to look them in the eyes and teach them how to handle it. I told them that people will try to tear you down, especially when you stand for something. But you don't let their hate define you. You stay true to who you are. That was one of the hardest things I ever had to do as a father, watching my kids face cruelty because of me." Barron looked up slowly. The story hit him hard. For the first time, he saw Obama not just as the enemy his father always described, but as a man who had protected his own family through storms of criticism. It shook something loose inside him. His throat tightened and he felt a strange mix of respect and confusion. "I don't know anymore," Barron said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I believe. Everything I thought was solid feels different now. I've spent so long repeating what my father said that I stopped asking myself what I actually think. This whole time I thought I was fighting for the truth, but now I'm not even sure whose truth it is." The confession came out raw and honest. Barron rubbed his face with both hands, looking drained. The anger from earlier had burned away, leaving behind confusion and a heavy sense of doubt. Obama didn't push. He just nodded slowly, letting the young man sit with his own thoughts. Barron sat quietly for a long moment, the weight of everything they had said pressing down on him. He finally stood up slowly, his legs feeling heavier than when he first walked in. "I didn't come here to just insult you," he said, his voice rough but sincere. "Some of the things I said, they went too far. I'm sorry for that part." It wasn't a full apology, but it was real. The anger had drained out of him, replaced by exhaustion and uncertainty. Obama rose from his chair and gave a small nod. "I appreciate that, Barron. Not many people in your position would say it. This wasn't easy for either of us." He paused, then looked the younger man straight in the eyes. "Go find your own voice. Don't spend your life carrying someone else's fights. You're smart enough to build something better. The choice is yours now." Barron nodded once, then turned toward the door. But before he stepped out, he stopped and looked back. "If you were me," he asked, his voice quiet but serious, "what would you do? Knowing everything you know now, standing in my shoes with my last name, what would you actually do?" Obama didn't hesitate. His answer came sharp and clear. "I'd stop trying to win my father's war and start figuring out what I stand for. Real leadership isn't about loyalty to the past. It's about having the courage to create a better future, even if it means disappointing the people who raised you." The words landed deep. Barron didn't reply. He simply gave one last nod and walked out of the library, the heavy door closing behind him with a soft thud. Obama stood alone in the quiet room. He walked over to the window and looked out into the Washington night, thinking about how one conversation could plant a seed that might grow years later. He wondered if Barron would truly change, or if the pull of family and politics would drag him back. Either way, the former president knew he had said what needed to be said. Outside, the cool evening air hit Barron hard as he stepped into the streets of Washington. The city lights glowed around him, cars passing in the distance, but everything felt different now. His mind was a storm of thoughts: anger, confusion, respect, and a strange new sense of freedom. For the first time, he wasn't sure what he believed, and somehow that didn't scare him as much as it should. The weight of his father's shadow was still there, but it felt a little lighter. Maybe there was room for his own light after all. He walked for several blocks without direction, hands in his pockets, replaying the entire night in his head. The way Obama stayed calm under fire, the brutal honesty. The moment he realized he had been living someone else's script. Leadership wasn't about being the loudest or the toughest. It was about staying steady when everything tried to break you. It was about choosing truth over comfort. At the corner near the old building, Barron stopped and turned around. He looked back at the lighted windows of the library one last time. Under his breath, he whispered, "I don't want to be just his son anymore." The words felt right. They felt like the start of something new. As he disappeared into the night, the meeting was over, but its impact was only beginning. Two very different generations had collided, and in that collision, something important had shifted. Not just for Barron Trump, but maybe for anyone willing to listen to hard truths and still choose to grow.